So, the other day I did an observation. This is actually my first time, so I was really excited. This was something I'd never experienced in my career. Um, I did an observation on you, walk through on your lesson on complex sentences. So, would you like to kind of summarize on what your lesson was for me?
But we have been working on sentence structure, um, and I'd seen this as a need because we had just finished narrative papers. And oftentimes I will do the sentence structure before we write them, but we had just not gotten to that unit yet. But after going over their narratives, reading those, and when we were doing the revising, the editing part, we had to spend a great deal of time with the editing their sentences. There were just lots of run-ons, lots of fragments. So once we had finished those papers, I decided to take a week of sentence structure, just going back over the simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and that day we just happened to be on the complex sentences. But that was the reason why I set that unit of study in, is just because of the need I was seeing in their writing, and also not just in their narratives, in their SCRs, just they have a lot of run-ons, just not putting any type of punctuation. So just to make their writing clear, I decided to focus on that unit. That day, it was, like I said, it was complex sentences, and we started out with just kind of a review of what we had already talked about, just the parts of the sentence, and talking about what was a dependent clause, what's an independent clause. And so our lesson pretty much started with a review of that and just a few slides going over it. And then we got into what makes a complex sentence, and where punctuation needs to go in a complex sentence. And so we did slides that broke sentences apart, and the kids were involved with that, and they had to label, what was the dependent clause, what's the independent clause,
Right.
and if there were multiple dependent clauses. And so there was student interaction with that. And then once that was over, I did have some group work where they went in and they had to work with partners, and they were given a bag that had sentence parts all cut up, and it had commas and the periods in there. And their task was to build 5 complex sentences, and they had to make sense. And some of the subordinating conjunctions could work with different sentences, but couldn't work with all of them.
Right.
So they had to make sure, once it was said and done, that their sentences flowed, that they make sense. But they were also building complex, since that was the focus for that day. And then after that, they did have some independent work the next day, just to kind of check. They had a few that they had to label. What type of sentence it was, and then they did have to construct a few complex sentences on their own. And they also had to do some compound, just because we had already talked about compound.
Right.
So just making sure they were good on the difference between the two. So,
Yeah, I saw that y'all had kind of worked on the compound sentences before, and I remember seeing that and that's one of the things I remember too, when I taught the junior high English, is that they get so stuck on that fanboy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're using the academic vocabulary and they seem kind of frozen and they're stuck on that fanboy acronym, and I noticed you were correcting them on that.
Well, just trying to teach them at this point what we actually call these, because there's a lot of different types of conjunctions. And
There
they need
are.
to know, you're not just looking for a coordinating conjunction or a fanboy, because that's really, they don't even understand it's coordinating. And when you teach them those words, it does help them when they learn, well, what does it mean to coordinate something? Then they understand more of what they're doing.
Right.
And they're old enough to
grasp what the word. Yeah, exactly.
And when they hear the word compound, what does that mean? Because I always introduce it with, well, you've studied compound words since you were in kindergarten and first grade. So these are just compound sentences, just to help them remember the two, because they'll get compound and complex mixed up. But
making the connection.
we
Well,
define
compound words.
what is compound? What are you doing? So
compound means kind of the same thing. It's just kind of the same things. Yeah. Yeah, and I think texting and those kinds of things have kind of ruined the way that students write and their ability to use punctuation and complex sentences and those kinds of things.
It does. And what they try to overuse, they just try to put a comma, and, in between everything. And, like, they'll start with their capital letter, they'll end a paragraph with a period, and they'll try to put lots of commas in between, and you say it doesn't work that way.
So how do you think maybe you could have strengthened your lesson? Is there anything in there that maybe could have gone a little bit better?
I would say with that particular group, it's a good mix of.
And this is 7th grade.
This was 7th grade, but this is a good mix of their levels of learning. And I do have some high ones, and I had at least one really high one in every group. And so I did make the sentences where they did have a subordinating conjunction in there with a capital letter. They had another word with a capital letter, so they would know kind of how a sentence should start. And I wish I'd left that out, because I did have a group that they didn't pay any attention though to the fact that there were capitals. Like they, and one of them is one of my girls who just thinks outside of the box, and they were able to switch them all up. They made all complex sentences though, but it was a higher level of thinking than what the others had to do. The ones that did see that I'd given them a little help with having a capital letter at the beginning of, enough that they would know the 5 and how they were supposed to start. And these girls didn't do it like that. And I thought, well, that's actually a higher level skill, because they also had to know, on this one, we started with the dependent clause, so we need the comma. But then on this one, I started with an independent clause, so I don't need the comma. They had to do that. Yeah. And I told them, I'm like, well, your sentences, I like some of yours better than the ones that were already structured, And I thought, because there were so many parts in that bag, I thought, well, I need to give them a little help. And I'm like, no, I actually didn't. Because then they were also able to work on that punctuation of when do I need a comma in a complex sentence, when do I not need one, and
so maybe it limited them, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like I limited the other groups, and they didn't limit themselves because they just went ahead and, they didn't pay attention to that.
They didn't pay attention to the capitalization.
They did have
Imagine that.
A word with a capital letter in the middle of a sentence, but they just took the lesson as, I just have to build complex sentences, and I thought they did a really good job. So I wish I hadn't put any in there, and they could have just, once they made them, they could have then written them out, because they did have to go after they did all the sentences. Everybody had to read them and make sure theirs made sense, and then they had to write a couple down in their notes just so that they would have that as a reference.
Right.
Because the next day we were looking at compound complex, so I wanted to be able to review, like, what is a compound, what is a complex, and now we're building one with both. So. Anyway.
And that's important, so they can differentiate between the two once you've got them established, because it's difficult. It really is, and they have to have those varying sentences in order for their stories.
Well, that and like their SCRs, they have to have these transitional phrases, and they have to understand how to work those in. And so, especially with the complex sentences, I mean, that's helping them, because that's so much of their transitional phrases in between paragraphs. And so,
to make
it make sense and to make it clear, because I tell them all the time, like, organization is huge with those, and if you can organize your thoughts through your transitional phrases and know I've got, I've answered it here, now I'm going to transition into this next part where I'm going to cite, and then I'm going to transition into my explain. I said that,
I actually
you're able to do that effectively.
I had more practice with that, honestly, with my writing, because I feel like my sentences, I need to work on. That's something, when I go back and do my editing, I'm like, I need to, that's what I always have to go back and adjust. So when I was going through and observing, I did notice, of course, the clear mini lesson and the part where y'all did your group thing. And then, of course, the independent practice where the students were doing the sort thing. But something that struck out to me the most was the classroom management. Like, your kids, they came in, they knew immediately what they needed to do. They were engaged. And I always notice that when I come in your room, because I pop in and out all the time, and I'm looking at the magic of the kids, and they're always engaged. It doesn't matter what time of the class I come in, what grade level it is. How do you get that to happen? Like, what's the magic on that?
Well, I didn't say this earlier. I do believe, like, I've taught elementary for a long time, and just building the rapport with the kids is so important, building the relationship. So I spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year, setting the expectation. I'll always have a clear structure. And it's all, it's pretty much the same. I vary what they do, obviously, but they know what to expect when they come in, and they know the expectation is this, and they know that I'm going to say something as soon as I see them doing something else, Right. So I just make sure I'm always consistent with what I'm doing. But I just work on communicating with the students and learning what they like, learning things that as soon as they come in, I can ask them about, so I engage them. Just in talking to me and speaking, and just so that as we're learning, we're also having good conversation, and then that way they're more willing later when we start reading novels and we start getting into deeper questions. It's easier for them to open up because right. Early on we've had conversations where they feel like I hope they feel like I've tried to invest in getting to know them and getting to know what their strengths are, and I also get to know, like, when I can ask, what types of questions I can ask certain kids. Because
right.
You get to know which ones feel comfortable with you asking this type of question and which ones don't. So you just have to get to know the kids early on. And so I do a lot of varied activities too, just to keep, and I think, a lot of that comes from elementary days. You don't want them hearing you too long, so I do lots of hands-on. I do lots of questioning. I do, I bring in group work, and I just try, especially with the 7th grade, because I have them for an hour and a half, and that's different.
Yeah, you've got
from
a double
last
block.
year, and you have the double block, and so you just have to keep them engaged, and that's the biggest part. But more than anything, it's just setting like an expectation early on, being consistent, but also just building opportunities to communicate. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, you're in a language arts classroom. I said, it's not just going to be you reading and writing. Like, we have to engage in the language. I said, and that's how you're building your vocabulary anyway. So we have to
that is true.
I'm like, we have to speak to one another and use the vocabulary in our speech, and then we start using it in our writing. So we do lots of speaking.
Right.
It's not quiet in my classroom much of the time, because if we're not talking to each other, they're talking in groups, and we do have our moments of independent, but we spend a lot of time together.
Well, I did notice that during your guided practice, that there was one student, there were 2 girls in the back, and one of them, when you had asked her a question, you allowed her a really long time. I think it was Avery. You allowed her a really long time to think about the response. And I thought that was really good, because she did come around and answer the question. I thought for a moment, oh no, she's not going to get it. But she did. She did come around and get it. So I thought that was really great that you allowed that time, that you were patient enough to.
You have to have the time. But then sometimes you have to put in a little prompts, because I think with that one, I remember, like, I had to go back a little bit with, well, remember we had done this and we've talked about this. You know what this part of a sentence is. So,
Right.
I had to lead. Sometimes you have to lead them too.
Yeah. I don't think you had to lead her much.
That
one I think you paused and gave her thinking time.
Yeah.
I think that was the important thing. But I was watching her face, and at first she was like a deer in a headlight, and then it was like, it took her a minute, and then she started thinking, and she's like, okay, she's not giving up on me. I've got to respond here, because she's very, very bashful.
But, yes, that one is for sure.
But then her friend over there, she was pretty much just copying stuff. I don't know how much she was. Yeah, she's the one that's just That's the one I worry about, which I know she's on our bubble, that we're already giving her extra attention. We're already doing what we can for her, but she's the one
But
that
that is one reason they're together right now. And it's good for her because that one, the one that she's with, the one that needed extra time, she's a very deep thinker, but she's also very patient, and she's also not one to just do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's gonna help along the way.
So that's why you have them paired up.
That is
I
one reason
figured the
they're
way the
paired.
classroom was arranged, you probably
Yeah.
had it very specific. That goes around with your excellent
Yeah.
classroom management. I figured that was what was going on, but so we did talk about the strength. Did we talk about the strength of a lesson? Was there a strength that you felt like? We talked about a change. You said that you would probably take out the capital letter. Was there a strength you think of the lesson?
I mean, I do think they were very engaged though in creating the sentences.
I do too. I really
did it
thought
with
was
both
great.
Groups of seventh
And they
graders,
thought outside the box. That was great.
They were invested in getting it done. They knew one group was getting some candy since it was never on Halloween, but there was a lot of good conversation in it. I mean, there was a lot of, they would put one together and then, oh no, this doesn't work because this subordinating conjunction is not going to sound right with this independent clause over here. You know, so they were invested in it. So I mean, I think that was a strength, having them, you know, do the collaborative building of it. And I like it that they were together because there were those conversations. Because if they had been on their own, some of them would have left it and not even realized there wasn't that flow. That, like, they would have made a sentence and it could have partially, but they might not have recognized, oh yeah, that's not the best flow. If we switch this dependent clause and put it up here, it's going to sound better. So
Right.
when you have them working together, they tend to pull that out more.
One of the things that, one of the purposes behind this particular lesson that you did, we've been really focused on this year about data-driven instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And you had been collecting samples on their constructive responses and the narrative writings, because we've been looking at that stuff lately. And you'd noticed that they had run-ons and that their sentence structures were bad. So that's why you created one of the reasons why you had done this lesson. So when you do that stuff, how do you make sure that these type of lessons align with the state standards and, you know, create these learning objectives? I mean, you just...
I use the TEKS resources, absolutely. And I look at their year at a glance, but I just break it up into units. And this particular one, the narrative writing was really in the first unit, and that's why I said I was a little bit behind with the sentence structure. Sometimes I do it before, but I also thought this time it'll make for good data for them to look at when we look, because I still have their rough drafts, so they can see, look at what you did here, and then they're about to finish an argumentative paper, and I'm hoping to see a difference.
Oh, I bet you will.
Yeah. So, but no, I go through the units of study. Everything's planned through the TEKS resources. It's used as my guide for that, just to keep me on track.
I love that year at a glance, because we did not have that for a long time, and now that we have that, if nothing else out of that, that's great. I just really do. So how do you assess whether your students are mastering the content during your instruction? What do you do?
Well, I'm always up and around.
Yes.
Checking, and they do a lot of just short answer responses. We do a lot of that because then it also gives us something to build off with our conversation and hearing each other's writing. So for this particular skill, I see a lot of their writing. But like I said, we do lots of discussion, participation. So I do a lot of informal assessment. But then, like I said, I get a lot of things put down on paper as far as writing goes.
Well, those are all really good. And
those
sometimes
are
for me,
informal. But
yes.
I mean, we also, I do the unit assessments. We have those once we finish a unit. I'll do little short kind of exit tickets along the way, where we've been working on something and we've done some together, and then I might end with just 2 to 4 that they need to do on their own. So I get a quick look at who's getting it. Usually it's at least 4. That way I actually get, to me, a more valid look at are they getting it. So I do, between just walking around and monitoring and checking on them and the discussions we have and the exit tickets, and then like I said, the big data I'll collect is from the unit assessments. So
and those are all really great ways to get that information. And I noticed some of these in the lesson, because you were, you had different strategies to pull your kids in, but like one of them was the sorting of the sentences. But do you have any other strategies that you use to keep students actively engaged with things? Are there any other specific, besides the sorting things? What are some other things that you use? Because like I said, you're like a master at keeping kids engaged. What are some other, like when you're reading stories, or if you get through with the story, or are there any other like making connection activities that you do with kids or anything? Like, do y'all do any like?
We do a lot.
Okay.
The kids are always engaged in the reading,
right?
Because
do they stop and take notes, or do they do like a partner share, or do they?
Like early on, we do. What is annotating? That's one of the first things we do in the first couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And we go through some specific annotating marks that we're always going to use. And we go through, we are always going to box vocabulary. We're always going to.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be on the first read. Sometimes on the first read, we will box vocabulary because that's one that they're able to do even as we're listening to a story the first time. And then, every week there is 1 to 2 specific skills. So even this week we were doing a drama, and our skill was foreshadowing and suspense. And so on that second read, they have their little highlighters or their colored pencils, and they have to be engaged. And I'll stop along the way and I'll talk about what they're finding, and then this is what I'm finding, and we'll share those things. So I do keep them engaged. It just depends on whatever our focus is. Or if we're reading informational, we'll stop on the first few and we'll come out to the side and we'll do what was the main idea, or what was the author's purpose in putting this section in there, and we come over and I do those with them, and then as we read the rest of the text, they're trying to do it on their own, and then we check. So we are annotating for something as we read.
And I think that's important.
And they always do vocabulary, whatever we're doing. And our vocabulary just always is, you're reading it and you try to make the inference as you're reading, and then we talk about what type of context clue it was. That way they know there's always something. And there are some words, and I tell them there are some that you just have to go look up. And really, even if you can make an inference, you need to go look it up anyway. If you have a question on it, I make them go look it up anyway. But I'm there are some that you can infer well enough that it's not going to affect the meaning of the content if you're a little off, especially if it makes enough sense with the rest of the text. But they're always with that. But like I said, there's always some skill that we're working on that keep them engaged in that way with any type of text. And we do lots of. We'll stop and they have to share with their table, and then just one person. That's one reason I've started grouping them in groups, just because they'll do something and they'll share with their table, and then just one person might share for the group, this is what we talked about. So, and we do that along the way just to keep them engaged. Also know there's an expectation that I am going to stop y'all, and y'all do have to talk about this.
Right.
So don't not know where we are and what we're reading.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, I was trying to think if there's any others that I think the lesson went really well. I think you did a great job on releasing those responsibilities to the students when they were learning. I think the guided practice was great. I thought the mini lesson was well timed. I really liked the slides and the way that the sentences were there, and then you clicked and then it had everything labeled for them. I like their notebooks. Do they have that ongoing journal?
Yeah, because every time we go over something, like I said, like even just with flashback,
is there reading stuff in there too, or is it just
language arts? It's a mix. It's a mix of all of it. They do, because some of my bell ringers are up on the board and they have to do it in here. Like if I have a quote up there, little pieces of their writing are in there. But then when we go over, anytime we start, like I was saying, we did flashback and foreshadowing and suspense with what we were doing this time. Because in the next drama, we also have some of that. So they should be better with it. And we'll have another skill that we'll add on. But like we did a whole mini lesson, and we watched like Disney videos, and
right, but that's the connections, exactly.
Just to like to see this is, and I mean, because they can pull out of there real quick, like this foreshadowing, or they can hear the music and know that
feel
building
the suspense,
and all of that. And so we do that, and we take a few notes on it just so that they have that as a reference. Because sometimes, like if I give them a quick little quiz over something, they can go in and they know, and so they do invest in their notes, because they know sometimes they'll be like, well, you can open your notes up, and if you took good ones. So like one of the things they did with sentences, they had to take some notes, and every time we learned a new sentence, we did some examples, and then if I did a short quiz, I'd be like, you can pull them out, and if you need that, because there's so many and they're learning it, so they don't always know all of them, but they can look in their notes and it can help them. And it teaches them to take good notes and to organize. No, like once I assess, you're going to give it to them and not do that. But no, and so their notebooks contain a little bit.
And I think that's good practice, because they're always going to be taking notes on things, and I think it's good for them to get that now and to be able to let, and that goes back to that one young lady in the back that I was talking about, that I think she was just kind of writing stuff. I mean, she was taking notes, and she was...
Yeah, and that notebook, though, isn't just for notes. They don't take a ton of notes. Like, they'll do their vocabulary in there. Like, if I give them 3 or 4 words that they're going to focus on that day, just... That's where they go in and they tell me what they think a word means, and then they tell me what context clues. They do that, and that's just a quick check. That way I'm not running off so many papers for little things like that. And then, like I said, any short responses, a lot of times he'll go in that notebook, and I don't know.
Well, I could tell she had pride in that. Like, that was her... I guess maybe she's shy and doesn't want to talk out, and maybe that is her thing.
Well, there are several, like, they like taking the extra time. They'll use different colors in it, but it also it's a good look at the end of the year of everything you've done, and
kind of track it all.
That's important to be able to go back and look at all that you've worked on and learned. And
so, you said next week y'all will do another thing. You'll do some more writing, so we'll be able to see if there's any change in what they've done on their...
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we'll get to have some samples to compare.
Argumentative this time, and so...
Okay. So it'll be a different type of writing?
I'm hoping. Yeah, a different type of writing, but see if they're using some, or if I'm going around reading some and I can be like, you may have a certain type of sentence, like I can say complex, compound, just double check this paragraph, looking for any compound, complex that you need to fix.
It's so hard. It is so hard. But it's important that they get it done now. All right. Well, I can't think of anything else. Like I said, I feel like it went really, really well. I enjoyed it. I enjoy those kids. I love junior high. I love junior high kids. I don't know what that makes me weird or what, because I mean I do.
Question.
Yes, I was gonna ask. So because I am going through like this part of my principalship, so what about? I guess the last part of it is to give feedback on my coaching. So this is the part that gets awkward for me. But do you have any feedback on this whole process?
Yes, I mean, you're constantly like you're I mean one who's always asking us to think about our data when we're planning lessons like this and what's driving the instruction. And you're also my go-to person for different situations I'm in and best practices, and you've given me resources for that, so I've always appreciated that. But yeah, just making us think about what's the purpose in what you're doing, like how is it relevant, and just keeping us on track with using our data to guide our instruction.
Right.
So that's between that and providing resources when we're needing it. You've always been a good coach in that area.
That.
One of my ones I depend on because I know you are a teacher of best practices. Well, I mean, I know you are.
I don't know about that, but I mean...
No, you always have been. And so that's why I've always tried to come to you for that. But I think in the role that you're in right now, just trying to make us, just reminding us, make sure we're going to our TEKS resources, make sure we're being guided by the units and what we've got to cover, and then once we do test our kids, make sure we're studying that data and spiraling in
what they might need, what they might need reteaching on.
And you were asking about like how do you keep them engaged, and when they come in, I mean that's how I use my bell ringers too, like the things that I spiral in or things that I see they didn't do good on.
Yeah.
So like I'm gonna put a little poem up here today with a couple of questions, because like we just
got through with that.
We just did the poetry one, and I mean that's a harder one, and that's just gonna be something I think I've already gone over that, and like I think I'm gonna pull a poem a week from like the
That's a great idea.
From like the Lomans, and that is gonna be a warm up because with 8th grade they do have more. I mean, all of them will have poetry, but that's definitely one that I've seen they could have a paired passage with. And so
I think that'll be a great practice. So, I really do.
But anyway, I think you have helped guide in definitely making us get on the TEKS resources and seeing what a good resource it is.
Yes.
I mean, we're a small school and we don't have a whole curriculum department that's laid it out for us. So we kind of have to, we use what we have to have, and we need to use what's good. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And we'll just keep fighting the good fight. I know the one good thing about data is that it's equitable, like it is what it is, and it's going to help any child, and it's going to, as long as we look at it and follow it, it's kind of exhausting at times. And it seems sometimes it seems a little cold because you're looking at numbers, but it's not really. It shows you where the kid is at.
Yeah, and it makes it important to them when they see that you've gone through it, and then you're like, it adds
value.
It adds value.
Yeah,
makes it relevant for them to know they're not just doing one of these tests for no reason.
And you make them see the value in it.
I told them with the first one, I'm like, this test, this is what Miss Hilliard, Miss Vance, and I, what we're looking at, even Mr. Talley, what we're pulling our data from, guys. I'm like,
and the school board, we're all looking at it.
I said, we are looking at it, and I said, we want to see growth. So when you do this, let's make sure we're doing our best, because sometimes they will think they can blow stuff off, but they need to know it's of value. It's important. It's important to them in our school.
Okay. Well, I think that's all that I have. Okay. I appreciate your help in this learning experience.
How far are we?
I've got about 10 minutes, but we'll be okay.
Okay.
We'll just let it.
We almost made it to the end of that period. Getting close.
Yeah, and I think we'll get the writing samples from what you do next week and
I'll
make it look
pull
good.
those for you and because eighth grade.
And I need to
they
show
did
you how. Do you have do you have a new assessment ready for the TC and PC? When you have the next one ready, I will show you how to get it connected to Google Classroom, and you can do it digitally.
Yeah. We just finished these, and I have gotten eighth grade finished, and I've got the one group who did well.
That's Mr. Talley.
Oh, you say what he says. Okay. Do you need that?
Hello?
video?
Hey.
I was going to let you know, I'm going to forward your email, but your email back on Ackerman.
Yeah, they just kind of popped through on me too. I saw Rebecca House. No. I'll notice that. Yes. Right. Right. Well, yeah, and I'll look into it and find out what's going on. Okay. Yeah. All right. It is. All right. All right. Well, thank you. Bye.
Oh, but yeah, the eighth grade. I mean, I have that one group. Rebecca and them, and I was gonna grade on a curve, but Rebecca makes a 96 on the test, and I'm still gonna. What I'm gonna do with, they did pretty good. It's just that some of the other, and it was a harder test. It was. I mean, I knew it going in. I thought the drama that I gave them was easier,
Mm-hmm.
and I was surprised on a few questions. They're just not going back and rereading. I think they went back and rereading. It was a two-part replay, but there was a third character brought into the conversation, And the ones in the second group, just totally did
We're not.
Mm-mm. And so I will have to grade on the curbstone, but I'm giving them the test back today, and I'm letting them, because we were gonna follow up with what they did yesterday on this article, but I don't know. I'll just grade these over the weekend, and we'll start new on Monday with this, and I'll let them. That way, I have the weekend to look over
Think
theirs.
about,
But
figure out what.
I mean, their highest in that group was a 70 something.
And that was in the
That's
higher
that
group.
second. No, that's the other one. The other group, I mean, they were around an 80. The other ones, but she was a 96. So like I know it's doable for them, and but you've got to go in. You've got to analyze the specific parts and making them take the time to do it. So.
And that's the.
But no, that sounds like, oh goodness, poetry. We're gonna bell ringer that, like.
It hit it, yeah.
We have to, but like we've got to move on because I've left this informational one. It's a big unit. We've got to start on it. So.
Yeah, I feel like informational, and I know we've had that conversation, is the hardest one because
Well, you've got to spend so much time on it.
And-
There's so many.
it's the vocabulary and they don't really know how to attack it. But that's something you're in your real life that you always do, and it's the one that people like. That's your news, that's your everything. And when you go, whatever career or technical school or college or whatever, that's the type of text you're reading and studying, and you've got to. And actually, I think I prefer informational to read. I don't know. I guess I'm weird.